Okay, this is the chart that we spent all last week talking about. This is, remember, a few different ways that you can try to evaluate these different systems to decide, which is better than the others. There were, I believe, 2 blank spots that you were going to fill in on the homework. So I'm going to, if you did this correctly on the homework, or maybe I think I told you what these ought to be. The Condorcet satisfies the monotonicity, and the dictatorship does not satisfy the Condorcet-Winner criterion. So this is the full chart. What I want to do today is just add one more column, and then that'll be it for this business as far as this chart goes. I would like to add one more column, and the name of this, just so you can fill it in, it's abbreviated as IIA. And this is another criterion which is based on what if people change their minds in a certain way, which is what the monotonicity, I don't know if you remember from last week, but the monotonicity is all about if somebody changes their mind to raise up a candidate, then that change should actually help that one candidate that you raised up, all right? This is like, you should feel like any sensible system would satisfy this. If I decide to, so technically what it says, the monotonicity, it says if somebody was going to win and then I decide to raise them up on one of the ballots, then they're still going to win because raising them up should just help them. This is true for all of our systems that we talked about, except for the ranked choice section. And we had a particular very weird example last time where sometimes it can be the case that you raise somebody up with the ranked choice and that actually ends up hurting them in the long run for the election. Very strange, and if you ask me, this is one of the big sort of downsides of the ranked choice, is that this very strange thing can happen in a ranked choice election. That kind of thing cannot happen in the plurality, which is why there's a check right there. All right. Anyway, let's talk about the IIA. This, like I said, is another criterion which is based on people changing their mind. The general idea of monotonicity is if I change my mind to raise somebody up, then in the results, they should be raised up or maybe stay the same. The IIA is not about raising somebody up eventually or specifically. The IIA, I'll tell you what it stands for. It stands for independence. It's a long name. From irrelevant alternatives. Independence from irrelevant alternatives. This is IIA. And the idea behind this one is making, I will say, irrelevant choices on a ballot won't change the result. And by irrelevant choices on a ballot, I mean something like shuffling around the losers. Although I'm going to be more specific about precisely what I mean by this, but the idea is if somebody changes their mind in a way which really has nothing to do with who won, they're just moving the losers around, then that shouldn't affect the results of the election. That's the idea behind the IIA. If somebody changes their mind only in a way which moves the losers around but has nothing to do with the positioning of the winner, then this will not change the result of the election. So I have an example here to demonstrate this, and then I'll write down a more technical definition of that. So here's an example. How about, it's a simple example using the BORDA. 3 people said ABC, and 2 people said BCA. All right? And let's see what happens using BORDA. That's the one with the points, remember? My points go 0, 1, 2. This is how the BORDA scores go. And then, remember, you add up and multiply with the column heading. So I hope you remember how to do this. A, using the BORDA, A gets 3 times 2 plus 2 times 0, right? That's 3 times 2 from this position and then 2 times 0 from this position for a total of 6 points. B gets 3 times 1 plus a 2 times 2. That's 3 plus 4, which is 7. Remember your order of operations. And then C gets, I see 3 times 0 plus 2 times 1, which is 2. And so B wins. All right? So this is my example. Now, this is just the election as it is, but I'm going to try to imagine, is there a way that I can change this in some way, shuffle around the losers, which will change the results of the election? Check it out. If I instead, sorry, I'm confused because I wrote something wrong on my paper, but I think it's going to be all right. What about, notice B is the winner, all right? Maybe I'll just I'll put a little box around B because B was the winner. Check it out though, I'm going to make a change which involves only shuffling the losers around. Let's change BCA, those votes, to BAC, all right? In the context of this IIA, this is regarded as an irrelevant change because all I did was swap the two losers, all right? But B was the winner anyway, so it shouldn't matter because I didn't make B any lower, right? B is still in the top position there, all right? So this, I'm going to say this only affects with an A, right? The losers. This is something I mess up. Should I use the A or the E here? Any grammatical experts? The A. I think the A. Maybe if I scribble it enough, you can't really tell if it's the A or the E. And then everyone will assume I did it right. Or maybe you assume I did it wrong. All right. I think I'm a pretty good writer in general, although that's one thing that I often mess up. This only affects the losers, right? All I did was we exchanged the positions of the C and the A, who are not winning anyway. So this is a very strange situation. You would not expect this to change the results. This is like if your friends ask you, you want to go to McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's. Let's all vote for it. And then you said, okay, I want to go to McDonald's is my first choice, but then Burger King and then Wendy's. And it turns out that that McDonald's wins. And you're like, no, wait, no, I changed my mind. I want McDonald's and then Wendy's and then Burger King. Everyone says, it doesn't matter because McDonald's won anyway. That kind of changing your mind, you can speak your truth, but that shouldn't affect the results. This only affects the losers. But in this particular example, actually the Borda does not satisfy the IIA because if you recount the election now, you'll see it does change who won the election. So now it looks like 3 people, I'm just going to redraw. 3 people said ABC, and now these 2, instead of BCA, they now say BAC. All right. Shuffled the losers a little bit. And now when I add up the points, the thing is A almost won the first time around. And now we just gave A a little bit more points. And actually when you do the math, you'll see that was enough actually to make A the winner. So A this time gets 3 times 2 plus 2 times 1, which is 8 now. B didn't move at all, so B gets the same amount of points, 3 times 1 plus 2 times 2, which is 7. And C now gets 0 points, 3 times 0 plus 2 times 0, which is 0. All right? Anyway, now A is the winner. This is a slightly weird thing about Borda. That is, sometimes when you shuffle around the losers, it actually matters. It changes the results of the election. All right? And so for that reason, we say Borda does not satisfy the IIA because you can shuffle around the losers and make it actually change the results. So I'm going to put a little X in the chart up there. Borda does not satisfy the IIA. All right? Let me write down specifically the definition of the IIA. I mean, I've been telling you sort of informally, but I will write it formally now. So what it says is, if there is a winner, I don't want to deal with ties or whatever, and we change the ballots without adjusting anyone's ranking relative to the winner. That is, all we're doing is shuffling the losers around. Then the results won't change. All right. So I'm just going to say these changes would be called irrelevant changes. Now it so happens in the Borda they actually matter. So the word irrelevant is used in kind of a technical sense. Irrelevant meaning we don't interchange anybody's ranking with respect to the winner. But sometimes that actually does affect the outcome of the election, for instance, in the Borda. But anyway, I'm going to say irrelevant changes, they look like maybe like in the example we just had, I had BAC in which B was the winner, and I can change this to BCA, keeping B as in the top, right? That change did not, what I said here, we changed ballots without adjusting anyone's ranking relative to the winner. So here, the winner stays on top, and all I did was exchange the two losers who were on the bottom, all right? That's what this kind of irrelevant change looks like. Or it could be that the winner was on the bottom. Let's say it looked like ABC, where C ended up winning, all right? I guess because C was on top on a bunch of other ballots or something. But anyway, you could change this to BAC, and this also counts as an irrelevant change, because if C was the winner to begin with, those red boxes I'm drawing means they were the winner. All right, the C was the winner here. And all I did was change the other two, all right, without changing their positions with respect to the winner, okay? There's a little subtlety here which is important that I want to point out. It doesn't necessarily mean that the winner just stays in the same location on the ballot. For example, if I have ABC, where B was the winner of the election, this changing to CBA, this, right? This one here doesn't count as an irrelevant change. Because remember what it means to be the relevance that I care about, I wrote up here. We change ballots without adjusting anyone's ranking relative to the winner. But here actually we did change people's rankings relative to the winner. For example, before the change, the C was below the winner, and after the change, the C is above the winner. All right, so this kind of change actually is not allowed when you're trying to make these irrelevant changes which only shuffle the losers around. You might say from a certain point of view, all I did was switch the two losers. I would say, yeah, but you actually made it so that someone who was below the winner is now above the winner, and someone who is above the winner is now below the winner. So that doesn't count as an irrelevant change, all right? Because we did here move someone from below the winner up to above. And when you do that, you would expect, yeah, if I'm moving someone from below the winner up to above, then maybe that should affect the results of the election. So that doesn't count as irrelevant. All right, this is the IIA. Okay, what I would like is, I don't think we need to do a lot more examples with this. I'm gonna put these on the homework, if you don't mind, like I did last week. But this will be on the homework, I suppose, for next week. I would like us to show that plurality and the ranked choice they also don't satisfy the IIA. All right. And the way you're going to do this is by making up examples just like this Borda one, where you can see someone was going to win. Then I change the losers around in some way, which causes somebody else to win. All right. That is possible in the Borda. It also is possible using plurality and the instant runoff. And I'll give you a hint. Actually, you can use the Bush-Gornader election can be an example of this, where if you change around the positions of two of the losers, you can make somebody else become the winner. All right. So this you will do on the homework for next week. And so I'm going to, let's just pretend that we all did that already. The plurality and the ranked choice both do not satisfy the IIA. Maybe I'll say right now, sometimes people ask me, in preparation before the quiz or before the test, do we need to memorize this chart? My answer is no. If you ask me just out of nowhere to tell you about one of these, like does Borda satisfy the Condorcet winner, I don't have this chart memorized, so I will not immediately be able to tell you, probably not. But you should be able to think it through for any one of these locations. So I would say on our quizzes or on our tests or on the homework, I might ask you something like, right here, explain to me why the ranked choice does satisfy the unanimity. You should be able to do that with a few moments of thought. I would not say that you should memorize all this stuff, though. All right? Okay. And also, sorry, on the homework, I'm also going to ask you to show that the dictatorship does satisfy the IIA. All right? Maybe you can see why already. The dictatorship does satisfy IIA. That means if somebody was going to win, and then just on some of the ballots, they changed their mind about some of the losers, is that original winner still going to win? The answer is yes, because it doesn't even matter what they said on the ballots anyway. The dictator's choice is what wins in the dictatorship. So all of these things about if you change the ballot, is it going to change the result? The dictatorship usually does satisfy those properties because changing the ballots never has an effect when you're using the dictatorship system. All right. Anyway, this last one, let's try and explain this. The Condorcet method and the IIA. Actually, the Condorcet does satisfy the IIA. Can we try to explain why that is? Condorcet's method does satisfy the IIA. All right, this is one, I could have asked you to explain this on the homework, but I can't put them all on the homework or else we'd have nothing to talk about during class. Condorcet's method does satisfy IIA. Here's how you have to write your little explanation of this. It should have the very similar format to, all the ones on the homework have a similar format to this. You always begin by saying, imagine that that something happens, and then you have to explain why somebody's going to win or maybe somebody's going to lose, depending on which criterion you're talking about. And the IIA specifically is about, I'm going to say, imagine we have a winner. Maybe I'll give it a name. Let's say imagine X is the winner. And then we change some ballots to, I'll just say we change some ballots without changing any rankings relative to X. All right, then you have to say something. Therefore, the conclusion is X is still the winner after you make those irrelevant changes. Using what I'm talking about here is Condorcet's method. Right? This is the basic structure of what you have to explain. Imagine X is the winner. Of course, using Condorcet's method, maybe I should have, would you mind if I squeeze that in there? Sorry about this. Using Condorcet method, just because that's what I'm talking about here. All right. Anyone feel like you can explain this just in ordinary words? If X is the winner using the Condorcet method, that means they are winning in all of the pairwise comparisons. And then we make one of these changes, which doesn't change any rankings with respect to X. Doesn't change any rankings relative to X. Yeah.
X only needs to win in pairwise comparisons that it's part of.
That's right. Yeah, right. We only care about the pairwise comparisons which involve x. Now, if you change around the losers, you might affect some of the other comparisons, but the comparisons involving x will not be changed by any kind of changes you make by shuffling the losers around. Okay? That's why x is still going to be the winner. So you want to say something like that in the middle. You don't have to say exactly the same words as I say. We change some ballots without changing any rankings relative to x. How about this? Then any pairwise comparison let's say x versus y will be unaffected, right? Because the changes that you make did not change anyone's opinion relative to x. So you might change some of the comparisons, but not the ones involving x, because the change that you made had nothing to do with the rankings relative to x. Then any pairwise comparison, x versus y, will be unaffected. Therefore, x is still the winner using Condorcet's method. All right? Sounds all right to me. Any thoughts about that? If you haven't looked at the homework yet, basically all the questions are like this. They're not about IIA, but they're about the majority, the unanimity, and the monotonicity criterion. But your answers should always look something like this. You should always basically know how to start and how to finish. The only kind of creativity that you need is to fill in usually one or two sentences in the middle. All right, there is essentially no adding up the points on this homework, which some people like, some people don't like. Yes?
I have a question. In the
Yeah.
homework, there are, I think, 2 exercises where we have to make an example.
Yes.
Do we also have to do this with example? Because what I did is just draw the table and demonstrate why it does or does not affect it.
Yeah, so when you are demonstrating these kinds of things, all the x's require an example, and the checks require some kind of explanation. So you can't demonstrate these checks just with an example, because the check means in all possible examples, the majority criterion is always satisfied. Whereas the x just means yeah, sometimes it's not. So to demonstrate one of the x's, all you got to do is one particular example. I hope that's what you did. All right. Anyway, the last blank spot there is a check. That's what we just explained. The Condorcet method does satisfy the IIA. All right? Like so. If any of you are interested in this topic, there's a great Wikipedia article about this, basically this chart. It's called something like Comparison of Voting Systems, I believe is the title of the Wikipedia article. Check it out. It has a truly enormous chart with 20 rows and 20 columns in it of there's many more ways that you could think of to evaluate voting systems. And there are, of course, other ways of doing. Here we just talked about 5 different voting methods, but there's many others. So if you're interested, check it out. Let's look at the chart now that we've kind of filled up our whole chart. At least, like I said, there's many other things that you could look at, but this is just all that we have time to talk about in this class. It looks to me like which one is the best. The Condorcet is pretty awesome, right? It actually satisfies all of these criteria that we would want it to satisfy. Anybody recall why don't we use the Condorcet for everything in the real world then? This seems to suggest that it's the greatest ever. Yeah?
There's not always a Condorcet.
Yeah, because the Condorcet method does not always choose a winner. There's not always a Condorcet method. So this is sort of in theory, you could say this is the best method, although as a practical method, it often doesn't work when you do it in the real world. So just looking at all of these checks is the Condorcet method is great when it works, but it often doesn't. All right. You can see, actually, is this a surprise? The plurality gets more checks than the ranked choice voting. Even though I always say that I kind of like the ranked choice better than the plurality, although the plurality gets the monotonicity when the ranked choice doesn't. Like I said, these what we have here are just 5 different criterion. These are not the only ways that you can try to judge these systems one against another. So you should not interpret this chart as meaning, hey, I guess the plurality really is better than the ranked choice. Well, it is better in this very specific way, but I mean, it's up to you still to decide which you think is actually better for practical use in the real world. Depends how much do you really care about the monotonicity criterion. That's up to you. All right, this is our chart. A natural thing would be, can we perhaps invent another system? Maybe I'll write this down. Is there a system? How about a practical system? I mean, not Condorcet's method. Is there a practical system that satisfies all of these? Criteria? You know, on the chart, the Condorcet method actually does satisfy all of them, but that is not suitable for using in the real world. It's not practical because it doesn't always satisfy, or it doesn't always choose a winner. There is a simple answer to this question. The answer is, I'm going to write it big, unfortunately, no. There is not a practical system that satisfies all of these criteria. If you are expecting me on some day to come out and say, all right, now it's time for us to decide which one is the best and come out with a real answer, there is not a real answer to that question, which one is the best. Actually, it is not possible to have a system that satisfies all these criteria. And what I mean by that, you might say like, here's one way to interpret what I'm saying is just that no one yet has come up with another system which actually checks all the boxes, and we're just waiting for some, you know, we got the crack minds in the think tanks are trying to come up with a system which satisfies all these. No, actually nobody is doing that because it has been mathematically proven that you cannot satisfy all of these. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about that. So this is a very famous, in the mathematics of voting, this is a very famous early result. So this was in the 1950s. And it's among people who know something about this, this is super famous. This is called Arrow's impossibility theorem. Arrow is a person. Impossibility theorem. Arrow is Kenneth Arrow, who was an economist. He's known for being an economist. I believe Arrow won the Nobel Prize in economics, not for this, but he also kind of dabbles in mathematics. And this is his, as far as I'm concerned, as a mathematician, this is his most famous thing. Although economists, I actually don't know anything about Arrow's work in economics. But Arrow's impossibility theorem. I'll just tell you what it says. Remember, theorem is just like a true fact that somebody has proven mathematically. It says, the only system... I said it's impossible to check all the boxes. Actually, it's much worse than that. The only system which always chooses a winner, so the Condorcet method is out. The only system which always chooses a winner and satisfies unanimity. It's not even you can't get all of them. And IIA. You can't even just get those two. The only system which always chooses a winner and satisfies unanimity and IIA is dictatorship. All right. This is regarded as sort of a bad news theorem. If you want, it's not even if you want to check all the boxes. It's even if you just want the unanimity and the IIA, the only way to do that is with the dictatorship, which obviously we don't want to use that in the real world. All right. Let me just say, this is an impossibility theorem. That means that Arrow actually proved that no such method can exist. That is a method which satisfies unanimity and IIA, which is other than dictatorship. So Arrow proved no such method can exist logically. So don't tell me like, oh, well, maybe we just haven't found this method yet, but maybe we just need to work harder. and figure it out. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying actually Arrow proved no such method can exist logically. All right, that's why it's called the impossibility theorem. It is impossible to design a system which satisfies the IIA and the unanimity. Sometimes people say to me, well, you can't prove a negative. And the answer is yes, you can. People say that like in like court trials or something. You can't prove that I didn't. That is true in some situations in life, but it's not true in mathematics. You can prove that certain things are logically impossible, and that's what Arrow did in his famous impossibility theorem. All right, the takeaway here is, even if you don't focus on the particular, the takeaway is no perfect voting system can exist. Right? And this is what you can tell your friends at lunch. No perfect voting system can exist. First of all, like, nobody's ever going to agree what exactly you mean by perfect. But even if you did agree what you mean by perfect, it's not possible to design a system which satisfies all the properties that you would want it to satisfy, because it's not possible to satisfy even the unanimity and the IIA together. So whatever you think the word perfect means, it's probably impossible to satisfy whatever you think you mean by a perfect voting system. No perfect voting system can exist. That means in the real world, we are left with a bunch of imperfect systems, and we sort of as a society have to choose which one we want to use for other reasons. I mean, we can say, like, there are some that are definitely bad, like the dictatorship, I think, is a bad system to use. But we don't really discard the dictatorship for mathematical reasons. For sort of societal reasons and issues of justice, we don't use dictatorship. So mathematically speaking, there is no such thing as a perfect voting system. I don't know if you feel like that's bad news. Anybody have any thoughts about this? I don't know. This is something that, like, I remember when I first learned this, it was very striking to me, because I, as a born and raised American, I feel like if anybody asks me what's the best system of government, I will immediately say democracy is the best. Democracy is based on voting, and now now that I know something about this stuff, I now believe there is no best way to do voting, which is a little strange in my opinion. I do really believe that democracy is the best way to build a society. But how do you actually do it? Like, specifically, how do you do voting? There isn't a best way to do voting. It's a little unfortunate, I guess. I don't know. Any thoughts about that? Strange but true fact about the nature of the world. No perfect voting system can exist. All right, this is all we're going to say about the big chart up here. The big chart is an interesting way of analyzing different voting systems. If you view this as a way to somehow choose the best one of all, that's not really possible. That's sort of a mirage. All right, great. I got just a few more things to say about this kind of voting, and then, well, probably next time we will move on to something completely different. If any of you have been upset that we're not talking about the Electoral College, that's what we're going to talk about. That and other related things. I don't know any Electoral College fans out there, or Electoral College haters. There's a lot of Electoral College haters. Before we get to that, I had just a few more kind of miscellaneous other things to discuss about voting. What I want to talk about for a little bit next is manipulability. Manipulability. This is actually will come up if you ever try to talk to somebody about these systems other than the plurality, say the ranked choice, or the Borda, or whatever. I will say with, how about with more sophisticated systems, people wonder about gaming the system. This is what I mean by manipulating the system, manipulability of the system. People wonder about gaming the system. If your votes are kind of complicated, like say the ranked choice, you might begin to wonder if the system is doing this somewhat complex, like system of rounds. Maybe there's some kind of trick way that I could vote, which will make my vote count better than if I had voted in some other way, just because of the weird way in which the system works. Maybe there's some way I can game the system. I don't mean by actually cheating, not like stealing people's ballots or something like that, but just like being cute about the way that I vote. Maybe there are some strategies or tactics that I could use to make my vote count more just by gaming the system in some way. So that's what I want to talk about. Gaming the system, specifically what I mean by this is voting in some way other than my true preferences in order to get a better outcome. And by better, of course, I mean better in my own opinion, right? Maybe there's some way that when you go to vote, say you're doing a ranked choice, maybe I like A, then B, then C, but just because of the way the rounds work or something, maybe it's actually better for me to vote A, then C, then B, even though that's not my real opinion. Maybe that, just because of the details of the way the system works, maybe that will actually work out better for me, make my vote count better somehow in the long run. All right. So I'm gonna write this as a definition. You could put this as another column in the chart, although we're not going to for reasons which you will see in a moment. I'm gonna say a voting system. This is another way you could judge a voting system. A voting system is manipulable. I'm basically gonna write, if you can actually game the system by voting slightly differently from your true preferences. So a voting system is manipulable if voters can achieve a better result in their own opinion. Did I spell achieve wrong? No. I'm also a little shaky on the IE thing. If voters can achieve a better result, better, of course, I mean in their own opinion, by voting differently from their true preferences. Maybe people can get better results by inventing a vote, which is not actually how they feel, but they're voting in this way in order to work the system somehow. All right, and this is regarded as a bad thing. All right, a voting system, you don't want your voting system to be manipulable. So this is bad, to be manipulable. What it means is if the system is manipulable, what it means is then the job of the voter, when you go to vote, you, in a manipulable system, you do not only think about what is your preferences, you think about what are my preferences, but you don't necessarily vote that way. You also have to think about what is the best strategy that I can use to cast my vote in a way which leads to the best outcome for me. And this may not be the same as what are my true preferences. So if the system is manipulable, then the voters must decide their preferences, first of all, which is fine. That's what voting is supposed to be all about. So the voters must decide their preferences, which is good. But also choose a good strategy. Because in a manipulable system, you don't always vote for your preferences. Sometimes there's some kind of tactic or strategy you can use to get a better result. All right? And this is generally regarded as bad. You want a system in which everybody can just decide what they want and vote that way, and then that vote counts as best as it can. You don't want to make all the voters also think about some kind of pro-gamer strats when they're casting their vote, right? That's not what the voting is supposed to be about. The voting is supposed to be about, they ask you your opinion and you say your opinion, that's all. You don't also have to think about some kind of good strategy for voting. All right, this is why manipulability is bad. So let's just talk about a few examples of our voting systems. How about the plurality? This is the system that we use most often. Is there a problem in plurality with manipulability? That is, when you vote in a plurality election, do you also have to think about not only who do I actually like the best, but how should I vote based on the way that the plurality system works? And maybe I'm not actually going to vote for who I like the best. Actually, plurality is manipulable. And the manipulation that people do in plurality is so basic that we don't even think about it. Manipulable. There actually is a strategy that people use when they are voting in the plurality. It's not just about vote who you like the best. If it was just about vote who you like the best, then like everybody would write in their moms or something like that, right? The fact is, in a plurality election, you don't actually vote for the person you like the best. As we've said many times, you vote for the person you think is going to win, who you also kind of like, right? That's how you do it in a plurality election. I don't vote for the one person who I think would be the best president ever. I vote for, either Trump or Biden, or whoever's on the ballot who I like better, who can actually win. Like, I also decide not to vote for Nader, even if I like him the best, right? Anyway, plurality is manipulable. Here's an example. Let's look at the Bush-Gore-Nader, because this is a simple example in which a manipulation would have led to a better outcome. I mean, better in the point of view of the voters who are making this manipulation. So, if you remember, the Bush-Gore-Nader election looked like 2.9 million said Bush-Gore-Nader, 2.9 said Gore-Bush-Nader. This again is speculation being very favorable to Bush, and then 0.1 million said Nader, Gore, Bush. All right. And of course, in this election, in the real world, using plurality, and this is what actually happened, Bush won. All right, maybe I'll sort of put a little box around the B's. Bush was the winner, all right? But actually, there are some people, some of these voters could have changed their vote in a way which actually led to a better outcome in their own opinion. Does anybody see some of these voters could have actually voted differently in a way which leads to a better outcome? I don't mean better in reality, I just mean in their own opinion it would have been better. Any ideas? Well, let's just look at the three columns. Could they have changed their votes that led to a better outcome? Actually, these people could not, because they already got the best outcome. Like their guy won, so they should not have. They can't even go for a better outcome. But some of these, actually, some of them could have. Yeah.
Maybe the people that voted for Nader would vote for Gore.
Yeah, Nader, Gore, Bush could vote instead for Gore, Nader, Bush. All right. If that had happened and you did the plurality, then actually Gore would have been the winner. Now, I'm not saying that's a better result in the real world, but I'm saying in these people, in their own opinion, that is a preferable result for them. Because Bush won, that was their last choice, all right? They should have instead voted like this, because this, in their own opinion, would have led to a better result, all right? So the Nader, Gore, Bush could vote instead for Gore, Nader, Bush, and then Gore wins the election, because the plurality count would then say 2.9 million for Bush and 3.0 for Gore. Yeah.
I'm confused on how that's manipulating because they wouldn't know. How would they know that they're gonna be like the change?
Yeah. How would they know? So.
Or are you saying like after they would go back?
Yeah, like of course in the real world you don't get to like change your votes after the election happens. So you could imagine that everybody before the election was. Just imagine that you're one of these Nader voters. You should think to yourself, in terms of manipulation, should I really vote for Nader in this election and possibly get a bad outcome? Or should I instead vote for Gore and get an election which is at least better off in my opinion? That counts as manipulating the system. Now, like I said before, we don't even think of it in this way in the plurality system just because we're all used to using the plurality system. But that is an example of somebody voting contrary to their true beliefs in an attempt to influence the outcome in a way which is preferable to them. Let me just finish what I was writing here. If these Nader people voted instead for Gore, then Gore wins, which is a better outcome in their opinion. And this is more or less exactly what everybody said after this election happened. They said those Nader people are idiots. They should not have voted for Nader. They should have instead voted for Gore.
Actually, I remember this election quite
Yeah.
well. And I remember the people that did vote for Nader, many of them voted for them because they knew that Nader was not going to win their state. It was going to probably be Gore or whatever. And so that therefore they wanted to send a signal out. They wanted to send a message that they were not particularly happy with this choice. So there were people that decided within their state, according to the electoral votes, how that would turn out. That's just the way I remember.
Yeah, there are some of these Nader voters are sort of voting as a protest against the two big parties. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so this when I write it in this way, that these Nader people liked Gore as a second place, that's probably inaccurate. Like in reality, many of these Nader voters, they maybe would have said, I don't like either Bush and Gore, so don't in their opinion, they were sort of equally jaded either way. Bush and Gore are equally bad options or something. Yeah, that's true. Yes?
Also in America, I don't know if this is a manipulation, but like people will vote in the primary for like the party they don't even want to win. They vote for like the weaker candidate just so when that candidate goes up against the other party that they have a better chance.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that is absolutely a manipulation of our primary system. Yeah, to vote for someone who you think is going to lose against the other candidate. Yeah. Yeah, our primary system is much more complicated than these other ones just because it has this sort of preliminary primary round and then you go into the final matchup. Yeah. Yeah, these are all examples of manipulations. The plurality system is manipulable, all right? This is a basic fact that everybody knows. When you are thinking about who you want to vote for, you not only think about who you actually want to win, but you also think about who actually has a good chance of winning. And most people restrict their voting just for people who have a good chance of winning, all right? I know a guy who wrote in Bob Dylan in the last election. That obviously he was not trying to make his vote actually influence the results. If you want your vote to really count in the plurality system, you better actually think about whether the person you're voting for has a chance of winning. All right, and that is a manipulation. Okay, so plurality is manipulable. I wanted to do one more example. How about the ranked choice? Can you manipulate the ranked choice? The answer is also yes. The ranked choice is also manipulable. It is not better than the plurality in this sense. Ranked choice voting is also manipulable. I have an example. All right. Again, we need an example where some people could have got a better outcome by changing their vote in a different way. So let's assume, or let's just look at this election. 6 people said ABC, 4 people said CBA, and 3 people said BCA. I would say that plurality, the manipulation that you do in plurality is kind of obvious. So obvious that everybody basically understands how to manipulate the plurality system, which is to say, always vote for one of the two major candidates. That's the strategy in plurality. The strategy in ranked choice is much more nebulous. And this is something actually that people don't like about ranked choice. And I can appreciate the criticism. You can say in the plurality system, yes, you can manipulate it, but basically everybody knows how to vote in a way which is the most beneficial for them. Which is to say, you either vote for one of the two big candidates. Don't vote for anybody else. That's the strategy. The strategy in ranked choice is much more complicated, and not everybody understands how to cast a vote in the strategically best way. And maybe that's a downside to the ranked choice. Whatever. Anyway, can we just see this one? If we do ranked choice, what happens here? In round one, you can see B will be eliminated. Right? Round one, I look just across the top, and A has 6 votes, C has 4, B has 3. B has the least, so we eliminate B. And then if I eliminate the B, these votes now will count for C, and then C will get 7, and A will get 6, and so C wins in the second round. I hope you don't mind if I don't write out all the details. In round one, we eliminate B, and in round two, C wins. All right? So the winner in this election is C. That's here, here, and here, right? Is there anybody in this election who can change their vote in a way which makes the election end up with a better result in their opinion? Now, when I'm trying to think about this, I am naturally drawn to this column here. These are the people who got the worst result possible. Maybe if they had done B, then A, then C, the rounds would have gone differently. Like actually they would have, right? If they put B first, then B would not have been eliminated in the first round, right? So actually it would have gone differently. And maybe is it possible that A could have won? Well, I thought about this ahead of time. Check it out. You'll see some examples like this on the homework for you to play around with. That is the homework next week. If one of the ABCs changes to BAC, then what happens? Then it looks like my chart now will say 5 people said ABC and 1 people said BAC. So I had, it used to be that 6 people said ABC. I'm changing only one of those people so that 5 of them still said ABC, and then 1 person has changed their mind to BAC. And then the others go the same way. 4 people still say CBA. 3 people still say BCA. All right. And now what happens when we do the ranked choice? Can anyone see who is eliminated in the first round? Yeah, C and B are actually tied in the first round with 4 votes each, and so they both get eliminated immediately. So in round 1, eliminate C and B, and then A wins. And this, the point is, in their opinion, this is a preferable outcome, right? Because these are the people who wanted A to win in the first place. One of those people changed their vote, actually dumped their favorite down 1 spot, but that actually leads to their favorite winning. All right, so A wins, and I will just say this is preferable to the ABC voters, because originally C was the winner, but those voters wanted A to win the best. And it actually is possible to make A win by them voting in a weird way, all right? It's very hard actually to describe in simple terms what is the best strategy in a ranked choice election. In plurality, the best strategy is vote for one of the 2 major candidates. But in the ranked choice, I can imagine if you were these voters here in this scenario, who would have thought that these people who wanted A to win, actually one of them should have put B to win. But if they all put B to win, then actually B would have won the whole election, so they don't all want to do that. This is much more complicated and harder to analyze. And that is generally regarded as a bad thing about the ranked choice, because the voters, there are sort of like hidden strategies which are not obvious that can really monkey around with the results of the election. All right, any thoughts about that?
And that is always used to make the plurality winner, quote unquote, the winner of the ranked choice elections, right? Like in this example, where A was the winner using plurality.
A was also the winner using plurality, yes? Yeah, although I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but I think it is possible to make an example where, I mean, here you made a change and eventually A was the winner. I think it's possible to, I don't know actually, in this example, maybe you can make a change to make B the winner. I think actually if these people all put B on top, then B will be the winner. That's still a preferable outcome in their opinion, but it's different from the plurality winner. Yeah. It's complicated though, is all I'm saying. And this actually is one real benefit to the plurality system in the real world, is it's not very complicated, and basically everybody is capable of understanding what's going to happen if I change my vote in a certain way. It's very predictable in that sense, where the ranked choice, sometimes weird and wild things can happen in a way which is hard to predict by the voters. All right? So which systems are manipulable? I said we could make a chart or a column on the chart about manipulation, but actually there's a reason why I didn't put this on the chart. There's another impossibility theorem. This is another famous, if you ask mathematicians, what are the famous theorems about voting? Everybody will say Arrow's theorem. That's a very famous one. And the second one, maybe a distant second, this is called, it has a great name, but it's interesting even beyond that. This is two people's names. Gibbard, the theorem of Gibbard and Satterthwaite. Gibbard and Satterthwaite theorem. It says all systems are manipulable except, anybody want to guess what the exception is? Yeah, somebody said it. Dictatorship. Dictatorship is not manipulable because it doesn't matter how anybody votes anyway, other than the dictator. So there isn't a way to strategically vote to game the system to somehow beat the dictator. You can't beat the dictator. But any other system is manipulable. So you can add this to the chart if you want, but it would just be like X in every column. There is no system which is free of manipulation. So this is like yet another thing that you can tell your friends about. There is no perfect voting system. Absolutely. I mean, whatever you mean by perfect probably would include a system which can't be gamed by strategic voting. All right. And in our remaining 10 minutes or so, I want to explain why. I have said many times before that the Borda is not really ever used in the real world. Even though, according to the chart, it doesn't necessarily look terrible. I mean, it has some checks and some X's, but is the Borda, like, the ranked choice is used in the real world many times. Many places use the ranked choice. Nobody uses the Borda. Why not? And I have said a few times there are reasons why. And actually, the reason why nobody uses Borda is because of manipulability. So I would like to just show, yeah.
I thought that the Borda system was used for the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Oh, that may be. I don't actually know that.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
I've read that.
That may be. I mean, it's used in like, for, like I said, it's used in Mario Kart or something. Like any system which involves several like matches where then you add up a bunch of points. I didn't know the Baseball Hall of Fame uses it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm about to tell you why they. If I was hired as a consultant, I would tell them not to use the Borda. But maybe that's not such a bad idea. It's definitely a bad idea to use this in real world politics. I want to explain. Borda is regarded as super manipulable. Can I just say super bad regarding manipulations? It may be that the Baseball Hall of Fame gives instructions to who votes on it, like coaches or
I think
retired people,
in the industry, I think, yeah.
people with money. Yeah, maybe they can rely on their voters to not try to manipulate the system. But they say, please, folks, just vote for your honest preferences. Don't try to manipulate the system strategically. Borda is regarded as super bad regarding manipulations. If you use Borda in the real world, check it out. Let's look at the Bush-Gore Nader again. Using Borda. And also assume all voters vote strategically. That is, they do not actually vote for their true opinion, but instead they monkey around with their vote in a way which will ensure that the best outcome in their opinion happens. So assume all voters vote strategically. All right. In the Borda, remember, each position that you give to somebody is gives them a certain amount of points. All right. So the strategy in the Borda, the strategy is put my favorite on top because I want my favorite guy to get the most points. So that's what you should do. There is no special strategy, but maybe I dump my guy down so that makes them win. That actually is not possible in the Borda. So the main strategy that everybody does is put my favorite candidate on the top. And I put the biggest contender opponent on the bottom. Even if they're not actually my worst choice, I want to dump them all the way to the bottom because I don't want to give them any points because they're the biggest threat to my guy winning. All right, this is the basic strategy with Borda. And if you give enough people enough time to think about it, everybody will realize this is what you should do in a Borda election. You put my favorite candidate on top, and you also put the biggest threat opposition on the bottom, because you don't want to give the other guy who might win, you don't want to give them any more points than you have to. So put them on the bottom, then they get 0 points. That's the basic strategy with the Borda. So check it out. In the Bush-Gore Nader election, so I'm going to say the true votes, that is, if we just assume this is really how the people truly felt, deep down in their hearts, 2.9 million people liked Bush the best, and then Gore, and then Nader. Another 2.9 million liked Gore the best, and then Bush, and then Nader. And then a 0.1 million liked Nader best, and then Gore, and then Bush. All right. Let's imagine that those are the votes which reflect people's true opinions. Now, this is speculation, but not too far off from reality, probably. Strategically, if you did this in the real world, they would vote differently, right? Because they will all follow the Borda strategy, which is put your guy on top and dump the other guy to the bottom. So anyone want to say, how would these Bush-Gore Nader voters, voting strategically, knowing that they're using the Borda, how would they have voted?
Bush, Nader, Gore.
Bush, Nader, Gore, right. Even though they don't like Nader, but Nader's not going to win anyway. So their principal thought, Bush, Nader, Gore. These people, their principal thought is to beat Gore. And so they don't want to give Gore any points when it comes to the Borda. They dump Gore all the way to the bottom. Aren't they worried that Nader's going to win? No, nobody's worried that Nader's going to win. So they don't mind putting Nader in the middle as a strategy, right? Not because they actually like Nader in the middle. Okay, and then the next column, 2.9 million people. What'll they say?
GNB.
GNB. Yeah, these people will say Gore, Nader, Bush for the same reason. Bush is their main opponent, and they dump Bush all the way to the bottom. They like Gore the best, so they put Gore on top. And then these last folks, point one. Actually, the Nader supporters probably cannot do any better than this by changing their votes around, right? Because their favorite is already on top, and presumably their least favorite is Bush, and they are already dumped to the bottom. And so this actually, strategically speaking, those are going to keep their votes the same. All right? And now let's see what happens in the results here. If you do the Borda, I'm going to count up the points. The points go 0, 1, 2, right? So Bush gets 2 times 2.9 million. Actually, I usually write it the other way around. I write 2.9 times 2 plus 0 from the other columns, right? 2.9 times 0 plus 0.1 times 0. For a total of 2.9 times 2, this is 5.8. 5.8 million points if they vote in that way. All right, Gore is on the bottom in the first column, so that's 2.9 times 0, plus the top of the next column, 2.9 times 2, plus the 1 point from the last column, 0.1 times 1. Add this together, it's 5.8. No, 5.9, right? A little bit more. They got that last column, 1 point. And then, just as usual, we better add up for Nader's also. Nader gets 2.9 times 1. So Gore is ahead, right? Nader gets 2.9 times 1 plus, in the next column, another 2.9 times 1 plus, in the last column, 0.1 times 2. Anybody doing the math here? What does this add up to? 6.0. Nader wins. Anybody expecting that? The moral of the story is, if you use Borda in the real world and everybody votes strategically, you will get a ridiculous result. All right? I hope I don't offend any Nader fans out there. Basically, nobody believes that Nader should have been the winner here. But if you use Borda in the real world, you can count on the voters voting in this strategic way, and then the result that you get might be totally different from the true opinion of the public. All right? So the moral of the story here is voting strategically with Borda, it doesn't always happen, of course, but it can lead to, I will say, absurd results, like Nader winning. Now, of course, in that election, Nader would have only won the state of Florida, but who knows what would have happened if we used Borda everywhere else. And this is the principal reason why Borda is not used in real-world politics. Now, in the case of the Baseball Hall of Fame, I would, if they asked me, I would say you probably shouldn't be using Borda, but it may be that they will just tell their voters, hey, don't try and monkey with the system at all. Just vote for who you think is actually the best. Probably the voters in that system individually don't have a lot invested in somebody winning or not, so maybe it doesn't really matter. Although in a real political election, you can bet that these people feel very strongly about the outcome, and they really want to vote in a way which maximizes, they want the most bang for their buck when they go and vote. And so they're gonna strategize. With Borda, you get crazy results.